Test one, test two, test three. This is a test. These are my slides. My name is Jason Davis, and this is putting tech into teaching. Yeah, buddy. All right. We got a couple of things here for you. If you're into this sort of thing, if you like to grow your own professional learning network, then I'm your guy, I guess, in some ways. I don't really post a whole lot these days. It's summertime, so I'm not really in the thick of it as I usually am. But from time to time, I will do some things onto these platforms, and that's pretty much where I've gotten into so far. Um, I have not, turn this thing off. I have not really gotten into threads yet, but it's on the way. And then, of course, there is a link to the presentation here. I'm going to put that post, obviously. Anywho, once again, my name is Jason, and I am a district secondary instructional coach for Richland School District 1 in Columbia, South Carolina, the hustling and bustling city of Columbia, South Carolina. I have an ELA and multilingual background of 11 plus glorious years, mixed between teaching here in the States, and actually I didn't really include that. A couple of years didn't get counted in that. A good portion of that was spent overseas teaching English to multilingual learners. Loved it. But anyways, that's pretty much what I do these days. Is district secondary instructional coach. I deal a lot with induction 2 and 3 teachers. And I guess I'm ignorant to what all states do. And it's probably the same thing, but in South Carolina, induction 2 and 3 would be teachers in their second or third year, respectively. And they just continue to need a lot of support. I also deal a lot in the realm of the science of reading and intervention within our district here. We have a couple of read to succeed laws and things like that that do affect our bottom percentage of students who are struggling readers. So I work a lot with teachers and administrators to figure out, like, hey, how can we bridge that gap? And I'm at the secondary level, so we're talking 6 through 12. So as you can imagine, that's quite the feat, and it's often smelly. If you enjoy play on words, you're probably going to enjoy this presentation. Okay, let's get into the learning intentions. As everybody should be doing all throughout their lessons, you always got to provide learning intentions, and as professionals, we need to do the same, right? So what we're doing is we're learning to develop methods to increase the appropriate technology used to enhance our learners' experiences, and that's in this case that will be within the BCS framework. I'm going to give you a lot of backstory, then I'm going to jump into what we can actually do with technology aligned with the BCS framework. Now, the why is the most important. We're learning this because there are learners in our classrooms right now that are being impeded by technology, right? We need to facilitate, not impede. Now, I'm not talking specifically about, this presentation was never made for students who are techno savvy, right? I honestly believe that there are very few students like that out there that you can clearly say, like, hey, I need you to open up this, I want to do this, download this file, do that, do this. Like, they might get it through repetition, they might get it through just sheer luck, but I really do believe once we're talking about middle schoolers and maybe some high schoolers get it a little bit better, we do have a huge divide in what we as educators want to do as opposed to what the students can do, right? What they know how to do with their technology. And then, of course, how will you know you've learned this? You'll know you've learned this when you are able to implement basically any of the strategies or any of the information that I've shared with you, any of the suggestions that have been given to you today in your own learning environment, whether that's at the school level, district level, whether you just take it and post it online, or whether you share it with friends at a dinner party, something like that. Like that's exactly how you'll know that this presentation was successful. Now, we do have an ISTE standard that I've attached to this. You, as the learner, you're going to continually improve your practice by watching this, right? And you're exploring proven and promising practices. And the goal here is, of course, to leverage technology to boost student learning. And I really love the way that's worded. I've always loved the way this is worded. You're leveraging technology to boost the student learning. Like the technology itself isn't going to do that. Like when you use leverage, there still has to be force on one side. So I really love the way this is worded. And part of this, one of the indicators would be that you're pursuing professional interest, creating and actively participating in local and global learning networks. That's it. That's what we're doing right now. All right, now let's get into the old nitty gritty here. When I give this presentation, if I were to give this presentation in person, this would be hilarious. And I'm hoping that as you watch this presentation, you are going to chuckle and laugh, and you should. I always start off by asking, like, what's the worst technology experience that you've ever had or heard of in the classroom? Now, I'm going to add like a little asterisk down here. I didn't put it in the slide, but I'm going to add a little bit of an asterisk. I want to know anything that wasn't actual, like academic. It was just basic technology. So, like, I've got two stories for you, okay, to give you some examples. And then, of course, if you want to tweet out like your example or something like that, you can highlight me or whatnot. You want to put it on LinkedIn? That's perfectly okay. That would be awesome. You want to tag me in it, right? So, first story. Had a student. This isn't even like really my story. This is like another teacher's story, but we both taught the same student. The student comes back from from summer vacation, and this was one of those years where they for some reason, like a lot of students were able to keep their laptops, especially if they were doing anything over the summer. The student comes back, and he's in this classroom, and the teacher asks him, like, "Hey, take out your laptop." And the student takes out his laptop, and you can just see it immediately, like oozing out, right? And the teacher looks at it. I'm next door. Teacher comes over and knocks on my, hey man, Mr. Davis, you gotta come see this. Like, you're not gonna believe it, because we both taught the kid. We both knew who the kid was. We both had interactions with the kid after school and things like that. It wasn't like we didn't know who it was. I go over there, and even if we didn't, this teacher and I had a good rapport. He would have probably called me over there. He was like, oh my gosh, you're not gonna believe this. So I come over there, and like we both see it oozing out, and this kid like opens up his laptop, and he turns it to the side, and you can just see all of this syrup. And I mean syrup, like it was maple syrup. We all smelled it. It was maple syrup just dripping out of this laptop. Like, can you imagine if you took your keyboard and you just poured as much maple syrup as you could, right? And then you just turned it and just let it drip out. Like, oh, like it was so gross. It was so disgusting. That student, I don't know what is that man. He was not allowed to have a laptop all year long because of that. And he still like he stuck to his guns on this. This is the funny part. Like, he stuck to his guns, and we kept asking, like, hey, how in the world does this happen? Like, clearly, like, you poured this on it. No, I don't know. I have no clue. Like, never once gave any indication that he actually had any hand in that. So that's one thing. That's non-academic. Nothing was teaching. No teaching involved at all. The second story that I'm going to share is academic. All right. Now, and I guess this is like loosely academic. You know, I taught English 1 for a number of years, and English 1, is usually it's the time when students are introduced to Shakespeare. And a lot of pacing guides in South Carolina, that's usually when they'll get it first, and it usually comes in the form of Romeo and Juliet. So we got done reading and analyzing and going through all the motions of our Romeo and Juliet unit, And of course, we got to that point, and this was back in the time period. Like, this is, so I've only been in it like, 11 plus years, so it's not like a lot has changed. But this was pre-COVID. It was still like socially acceptable to like show a movie after you did the unit, if there was a movie. Let's put it that way. So we put on 1968, I believe it's 1968, Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, like the classic, like the one that no one has ever been able to remake ever, like in the same capacity. The one that like still, like if you showed up and said, "Hey, we're gonna watch a Romeo and Juliet movie," nobody's saying like the DiCaprio version. Nobody's saying like a little offshoot version. Like it's always Franco Zeffirelli's 1968 Romeo and Juliet, right? So we're showing that, and I knew because I watched that video when I was a freshman, and I knew there was one scene where Juliet is getting out of bed, and because I remember, because my teacher did not stop it when I was in high school, and I guess that was a different time. She survived. Of course, she was also in her last year of teaching, but still. Anywho, so I knew that there was a part where there was going to be some inappropriateness, right? And in the middle school classroom, like I remember I was quite young to the game at that point, very worried, job security and all that, right? So I knew, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pause it before. I'm going to turn off the monitor. I'm going to fast forward, and then I'm going to hit play, and then boom, none the wiser. Well, that's not what happened. Okay, that's what I wanted to happen. That's not what happened. Not only did I pause it on the very moment that, like it was there, I froze, like in a frantic, as I'm trying to, like, oh my God, like, trying to turn everything off. I literally froze my computer. It would not respond. I mean, you understand, this is back in the days when like most people were using like VLC players and things like that, right? Windows media players, like things that weren't that great to watch things. And this sucker froze, and it made it even worse. And if you can imagine a grown man getting out of his death, like not even getting out is not even the best way of describing it, frantically jumping up from his desk and across the room, running across the room and yanking the cables, every cable he could find, out of the wall to get the projector to turn off. And I am red, I'm apple red, dark Washington red, apple, and my kids are like, they're red, like, this is eighth graders, like they're still kids, like they did not expect to see that morning. Let's put it that way. It was hilarious to them, and I thought to myself, "This is it. This is it. This is the moment where I'm done. I'm done." I remember going down to the administrator after that and just being like, "So, let me run a little something by you here. Let's just say, for example," when she shook her head and then ended up getting to the principal, and nothing ever happened of it. But it was like hands down the worst thing that ever happened with me with technology. And I've had a lot of flops. Let's put it that way. All right, so I'm curious, like if you want to tag online, you want to get on Twitter, get on X, get on LinkedIn, you want to tag me or something like that, you go right ahead. All right, let's play a game, because this is putting the tech back into teaching, and I want to make sure that we are on the same page. When I say technology, what am I actually meaning by technology? Okay, so I'm gonna put up a little picture here, and you just to yourself, I want you to think like, hey, yes or no, is this technology? All right, would this count? Okay, plain old pencil. Technology, yes or no? What about just paper? Good old extra spaced paper, not that college ruled. All right. What about stuff like this? Arts and crafts. Is that technology? What about manipulatives, things you could use in the classroom? All right. What about just a plain old whiteboard? And heaven forbid any of you who might still be holding on to a chalkboard out there. All right. Okay, so what? So like, here's the thing. technology is technology, whether you're talking about earlier forms of technology or you're talking about newer forms of technology. What I'm going to share with you today is mostly going to focus on the newer forms of technology and some examples of how you can use that within the BCS framework. But if that's not what you do, then like it still is very, very much applicable. If you're reverting back to earlier forms of technology, and I'm saying that as nicely as I possibly can because I don't want there to be a negative connotation on any teacher who's like, you know what, my students don't need that right now. There is that argument, and I am not a tech pusher per se, meaning that like I'm just if you're not doing it, like I don't want to talk to you. I'm not an elitist when it comes to technology in the classroom. If I walk into an induction 2 or 3 classroom and I see the teacher doing pencil and paper exercises, but they're still doing all the things we want to see in a classroom. There's still collaboration going on. There's still it's more student centered than teaching centered. If I see group work, if I see things like that, if I see students getting up and moving, right? If I see them speaking and I see them communicating with one another, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Not everything has to be done with technology, and I know we are all working someplace that has a contract, and we kind of feel the need to use the devices that are provided, but that doesn't mean you have to. All right. Just want to make sure we're on the same page there. So you do you, boo, right? All right. So I got that out of the way. Let me tell you a little bit about how this started. All right, and we're getting there. Don't worry, folks. This is some good stuff. This is the stuff that's going to really um, make or break this presentation because a lot of folks are going to be able to commiserate with me on this, and they're going to be you're going to be in it to win it even more after hearing these stories. So my journey with technology, I wasn't always this techno whiz. I'm not even a whiz. I'm not even close to a whiz. There are a lot of folks out there way better than me. But I am a Microsoft Innovative Educator expert. I do use technology a lot in the classroom, but I do understand the difficulties of implementing and integrating technology in your everyday teaching lives very much. And this is how I know, right? When I decided that I was going to like, hey, jump all in, and I was going to go down this route, and I know we got some Google folks out there, and that's fine. It's all good. Technology is technology. You can do the same thing with Google Suite as you could with Microsoft Office. So I'm not even getting in that argument. But when I decided that I was going to go down this innovative educator expert path, I decided to like really double down on technology. And at that time, I was messing with a group of students that, well, they were struggling. They were struggling in all aspects of education. Okay. Meaning that not only did they struggle in class, they struggled with just basic use of technology. They struggled with organization. They struggled with everything. Everything you could imagine, the soft skills a student would need to be successful, they struggled with it. But that doesn't matter because I came in guns blazing, baby. I was like, yeah, let's get this. I'm going to do it. I had about 20 students in that class. And I quickly realized I bit off more than I could chew. Now, I'm gonna tell you this: like when I started it, like I had hatched a master plan, right? It was Doctor Evil or Doctor Good, I guess, in this scenario, where none of us are up to evil. And I thought to myself, hey, I'm really gonna crush this. I planned out everything that I wanted. All right, I knew I was going to use Microsoft OneNote. I knew I was going to use a lot of collaborative Word documents. I knew I was going to have students doing all kinds of things with the Microsoft products. And I knew this was going to be great. I planned out everything, right? And I knew that I was going to hit that ground running. Students were going to come into my classroom with technology and we were going to jam. Like, we were going to be grinding, right? What do you think happened? I think you probably can figure that out right now. What do you think happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. That was a terrible idea. Like, I really shouldn't have done that. I really shouldn't have done that. And if I'm going to be like extremely honest, all right, integrating technology is no different from doing any other type of teaching, right? Like you have to teach students how to use and interact with whatever form of technology you are using. Okay. Even in elementary school, they don't just walk right in and say, all right, everybody take out a piece of paper and then let's do hot dog style. They don't, you have to model that. You have to scaffold that in. Like you have to be able to show students like, hey, this is what folding the paper long ways is. I'm going to refer to it as hot dog style from here. You know what I mean? Like, so even the smallest things we do in the classroom, there's a level of scaffolding, there's a level of integrating that has to be taken care of. I didn't do well with that at all. So, like, if we're talking about backwards by design, like, you know, you have to do that with technology too. Like when you plan your units out and you realize like, hey, I want to be doing this, and I know that the end game, I want my students doing all that. I'm gonna be like, all right, okay, cool, and I'm gonna have to do it on Word, no problem. No, 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 that's a big problem right there because if you're talking about scaffolding, if you're talking about moving towards an assessment through planning, and you're talking about using technology along the way, you have to plan for showing students how to use that technology as well. I didn't do that. I just assumed that because students had cell phones, that because students had been in grade school, elementary school with technology, because students are surrounded by technology all the time, because their other teachers use technology, I just assumed that they could do it. And that is a really bad assumption. And I want to steer every single person watching this video away from that assumption. All right. Your long range planning, like if you don't plan for everything academically and what you're going to use, how you're going to implement, how you're going to scaffold in the materials, like in this case, technology, you're going to end up like Dwight over here and you're just going to be screaming your head out, hopefully not in front of the students. All right. Now, there's also several things that I really wish I had thought about when I decided what technology I wanted to use. And these days, when I talk and I coach with teachers, and they're like, I want to use this, I want to have students doing this. These are the things I'm talking about. Like, all right, okay, so you want to use some technology. All right, so, well, we still have to kind of understand and get a basic idea of what are we asking them to do with that technology. Okay, like you still have to go through these cliche like Bloom's taxonomy exercises to figure out like not only are you analyzing something academically, you're also going to use technology to do that. Okay, I also didn't really think a lot about the rigor and relevance, what they're actually going to be doing within my discipline, right? And I really wish I knew more about how much I needed to continuously give my students an opportunity to retrieve that knowledge that I taught them. So, like, let's say, for example, you did plan it out and you did say, hey, I'm going to use this new thing. Most students don't know what OneNote is, right? Microsoft OneNote. And I'm going to get them to go there. Most of the students didn't know like what the waffle was. They didn't know how to access all these, products. Google has the same thing. You got your 9 dots in the right. Microsoft has 9 dots on the left. Real different. So they didn't know how to do that, and they didn't realize that they needed constant practice. So like me showing them how to do it on day one did not mean that they could do the same thing on day 2 or day 3. So I didn't really account for Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve in this. Like I'd show like 20. Just look at the chart. Like 20 minutes after I had shown them how to get into all this stuff and how to do this, they'd already lost almost 50% of what I told them. And by the end of the day, they definitely had lost half of what I told them. What if you're on like a block schedule and you see your students every other day? If they're not coming back to it, they just continuously lose that skill, right? So that's just one thing to think about. And I kind of really wish I had known that I needed to review things like, hey, let's go over this. And that just kind of would have helped out. This is if you really want to nerd out. this kind of stuff right here. Dov Lamov, Teach Like a Champion, describes it out, puts it in very, very cool layman's terms, because I was a layman when I first started doing this. Now, there's one more thing I really wish I'd known about, and this came about really during the pandemic. There's a pretty cool article on Edutopia about the SAMR model, and there's some other stuff out there as well. It's not just Edutopia, but I really wish I'd known about this. Like, if you're not a Bloom's type person and you're not really, thinking about things that way, at least think about this with regards to technology. Okay, whatever you've decided to do in the classroom, instructional wise, whatever your strategy is, if you're replacing it or you're using technology, then I want you to think about if it's substituting, if it's augmenting, if it's modifying, if it's redefining it. Okay, because that definitely is going to play into it. All right, how are you ultimately going to use technology? And this happens in the planning process. You want to know, like, hey, I normally would have students just, fill this out on a piece of paper. Now I'm going to have it filled out online. Okay, that's substituting. You're just substituting technology, and there's not a hierarchy here. It's not like, hey, I'm only substituting. It's not really that great. This isn't really like Bloom's per se. Each one has its own little thing. But I guess my point there is there's no hierarchy, meaning that we should always be going for redefinition. Sometimes substituting is the best, is the way to go. Okay, it's convenient. All right, you're enhancing education at that point. If you want to get into the transformation point, then that's definitely you're modifying and redefining. But anyways, there's a link to the article there. It's really good. I really think about it. And when you get to a point, if you ever get to a point, Emma Bratton is out there, and she put this graphic out there. It's combining the SAMR model and Bloom's together, and you start thinking about, like, hey, if I am going to be substituting, I still need to think about, like, what are they doing? All right, what are they cognitively? What am I asking these students to do? All right, that's very important to make sure you have that done. All right, let's get into it. And there's some technology used by Quadrant. This was great. This was courtesy of Will Murphy and Jenny Combs. I watched them at AMLE a couple of years back in DC, take it to the next level. They had found this and presented it. It was great. It gives you some examples of what you could be doing if you're talking about an application model as well as the knowledge taxonomy. Okay, so moving forward, you know where you're going. Okay, you know where you're going, and you gotta know how to start there. That's awesome. So you know how you gotta do all these things. When you get your students in, things like that, like, make sure you assess them before you even try and do any kind of technology. Make sure you assess them. Make sure you know what they can and cannot do with technology. Do not go down the road of following. I'm going to use the term technomyth. It's not a thing. I don't think it's a thing. I'm just going to use it. Don't go down the road of a technomyth. Okay? Like, just because your student has a cell phone doesn't mean they know how to use technology in the way that you want them to use it. Just because if you fall down in front of them, they will have that video recorded and on TikTok in less than 5 minutes, doesn't mean that they're able to do what you want them to do with technology. All right, that's a myth. I mean, that is an assumption. Okay, just because they've had technology surrounded by them, just because your district pays millions and millions and millions of dollars for any type of computer, tablet, whatever device to give to these students, just because you're one-to-one, just because you have a computer lab, does not mean students know how to use what you're asking them to do, okay, technology-wise. So assess your students, and then once you find what they're really good at, right, then you want to build on those strengths and weaknesses, and you got to get through that daily repetition, that retrieval practice. Don't be that person that is, hey, I'm going to use a different technology every week. And these kids are going to have 1,000,000 passwords or 1,000,000 bookmarks or something like that. At the end of the time, they're going to be doing all these things because they need all this exposure. No, find what is good and stick with it. Right? Find what is good and stick with it. All right. When they're ready for something new, okay, you can try that out. But, like, don't feel like you have to always do a different program each time. I'm gonna do this one in Google Docs, and then I'm gonna do slides on this one, and then I'm gonna do sheets for that, and then we're gonna do an interactive this and that, and then next week I'm gonna have them on Cami, and then the week after that I'm gonna have them on Canva, and then no, keep it simple, right? And some of you will get this. I hope everybody gets it, right? So don't double dip. All right. This is really the last kind of thing that's of most importance. Don't show them new, like if they're new to Canva, like students in our district were new to Canva. They've just now been given access to it. If you don't know what Canva is, it's awesome. It's not the same as Canvas. That's something different. That's the LMS. Canva is more of your design, or maybe you're using Adobe Express, or maybe something else. All right. If they're new to it, you need to spend like the day or a class or two just getting used to that. Like seriously, just getting used to that. Do not try and start something instructional and it's like that's new to them. Like you're going to go over something new to them, and you're going to give them new technology at the same time. No. That's double dipping, and we don't want to do that. Like you do one or the other. Preferably, you would do the technology first, and then move into the instruction second. That's what's going to help you. So you need to scaffold that in. Do not double dip, okay? And then make sure, and this is just for your sanity. This is just for your sanity, right? Have a system of support. It's always odd to me is when I walk into classrooms, like these things that I see that principals and instructional leaders all require their teachers to have. You got to have this on the board. You got to have your classroom rules somewhere posted. You got to have all these things supporting your students. You got to have posters up, chart paper of this, chart paper of that, reminding students, hey, when you're doing this, you're doing that, blah, 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 this and that, right? I rarely ever see anything about technology. I rarely ever see anything about technology. Like I walked in on a teacher one time, and they were just kind of like giving the students the business a little bit, like fussing a little bit, like, hey, like you guys got to check your email, like you got to check it. And I'm looking around the room and like there's no visual reminder. There was nothing like in the home. This was at the beginning of the day too. There was nothing in that homeroom time. There was nothing in that downtime that was like, hey, everybody, all right, get into your email, check it. I sent you something. I sent you some people. There's nothing like that. There's no reminders. You can't assume that students are just going to know that. You can't assume that students are going to know they need to write their passwords down somewhere, their usernames and passwords. You can't assume that like students are going to be able to remember their passwords. You really, 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 really cannot assume that. So make sure you have those systems of support in there. I know it's a lot of work on the front end, but it will save you. Students, like they're just like adults, man. Like how many of you like go into an account that you haven't been in the last week or two or month and you can't remember your password? How many of you have hit that like save my password, update it, like update and save and use it automatically button so many times now that you don't actually have to put in your password? And if they actually ask you for your password, you're gonna bomb. You're not gonna get it. Or how many of you have busted your device and like all of a sudden like you've lost all your passwords and things like that? I know that's hard to do. I use Microsoft Profiles, so that doesn't really happen with me. But you got to teach your students how to do that too, right? You got to teach them how to do that. So get yourself systems of support in place and make sure you're doing that, because you're not going to be able to use technology as effectively if you don't. All right. Now, and then of course, when they're ready and you're ready, you let that adventure begin and they start soaring. Just to recap that portion of it, you got to make a plan, assess your students, introduce review technology use over periods of time, right? Scaffold it in, never introduce new tech and new content at the same time. Make sure you set up your system of support and fail safes. I love that word, fail safes. It's almost like we're being hacked. We got to fail safe, right? Be patient, be flexible, and be happy, folks. Like that's how it works. And so, what is all this like? Once you get through all that, what does all this mean? And when we're talking about the BCS instructional framework, so I'm going to go over 3 of them right now. First one I want to hit up is reading. How can we use technology to enhance reading in the classroom? Oh my goodness, like we have come a long way. Now I'm going to specifically mention some Microsoft products, and I'm not pushing Microsoft. Google more than likely has similar, if not the same, some type of thing, but I'm just going to throw it out there. To improve and enhance reading in the classroom, we've got a lot of things we can do, but the best kind of technology out there is going to offer your students the opportunity for them to read aloud, right? That's really what we want them to do, okay? When we're doing that, we're allowing students the opportunity to improve their prosody, like their expressions. We're making them more engaged. As they are engaged in their own learning, that is automatically something that just comes along for the ride When they're engaged, they often get a bolster of encouragement. All right. This is going to be beneficial for struggling readers. This will be beneficial for anyone who has dyslexia. This will be beneficial for, even dyslexia, dysgraphia, all that stuff. We have anything, we can improve vocabulary as well while we're doing it. It's increased comprehension. All right, studies out there are showing that, like, hey, like if you're having a student read something aloud, like it increases their comprehension, because what happens is like when you're reading and you're not reading aloud and you're not having anything to help you out with that, you're actually reading faster in your mind and you're probably skipping over words. If you're reading aloud, then you're actually slowing down and you're increasing your comprehension, most likely. And then, of course, the accessibility aspect of it, right? It's just so much easier to do that. Now, I use a lot of Microsoft products, and if I'm talking about having something read aloud to me, I'm going to use Immersive Reader or whatnot, or I'm going to use something inside of a document, or I'm going to use all those tools to my advantage. All right, that's one of the first things I would do if I'm talking about trying to increase reading and whatnot. Now, when we're talking about writing, how can we use technology to enhance our writing? Oh my gosh, like I used to tell this joke all the time in class. I probably shouldn't tell it here, but anyways, it was along the lines of like students like basically look like chickens. Sometimes these days, I'll say, it's kind of a generalization across the board, but I would say from my experience in the classroom that students do not type as easily as they used to. In fact, I've seen entire responses written typed with just this one finger right here. Now, let's take for example, like, hey, it's not an issue of typing; it's an issue of just getting it out there. Actually getting your thoughts into the form. Maybe you're really conscious about spelling. Maybe you're conscious about like how long it takes you to type. I love a lot of technology we have out there. In fact, I love using Microsoft Docs. I love using AI. I love using that stuff. I love using Microsoft Word Online. Google has the same function where you can actually dictate. You can actually speak into. You go to Amazon. You get these headphones with the microphone. You get a class set, right, or you get whatever you can. You put it out there on your wish list. You do what you got to do. You beg your admin for it, and you get these kids who normally struggle to type and write. You get them to plug it in, hook up their microphone. You hit that dictate button, and you have them speak what they would normally write. Okay, so I know there's some folks out there that might be against that per se, like, but that's not a part of the writing process. Like your job is to get the students' thoughts out of their head and onto, paper per se. Okay, word processing software and AI is amazing for that. Okay, now I'm not talking about AI like ChatGPT or other forms, Google Bard or whatnot. I'm talking about like just basically using what we already use. Um, our phones all have AI incorporated into it. It helps to kind of figure out what we're saying. It gives us options. It gives us words that we might want to be using, things like that, to help students. Now, this again helps with encouragement and engagement. It's helping with our grammar and our spell checks, things like that. It's helping with accessibility, right? It's helping students' vocabulary and syntax and structure and all that. They're able to get it out, right? If they're worried about like putting it one letter at a time, then they lose a lot of that flow that comes out. It does increase collaboration, and it does increase the ability to give feedback, actionable feedback for students. Okay, love this one. Speaking. How can we use technology to enhance speaking now? Again, like I have an ML background, so this is immediately where I'm focused on how things like this can help. Now you can use Microsoft Office or Google Suite to do speech to text. Right, that's kind of what I was talking about with the writing. It's a little bit different now. We can use it for translation services. We can use it for digital recordings, podcasting, collaboration, engagement, language learning, things like that can all be used to enhance our students' speaking abilities. All right, now whether or not that's language learning or whether or not that's your communication standards, you just want students to be able to get their thoughts out verbally and out loud, out loud in some sort of a format. We have to go with the comforts of our students. Sometimes that means like they get a recording. You send them out in the hallway, they're able to record their thoughts like that. That's it. They get their voice out there. Maybe that's doing audio. Man, I used to give quizzes. I used to give quizzes on Microsoft Forms where students could leave an audio. They could leave. They could just tell me their answer. A lot of things do that. Quizzes has that option now. A lot of technology out there has the option for you to ask them a question. They can just read it, type it, and then they can insert their audio file right there. They can record their answer. Boom, you have their thoughts. You have everything out there, and they're using technology really as a way to facilitate, not impede. Okay, that's a big one. Now, this is the last one I'm going to go over. I know there are a couple of other in the BCS framework, but these are the ones that I really wanted to focus on. This is the best one. Like honestly, like this is the one. Like when I was in the classroom in my later years, this technology started to get like really awesome, and things like Plickers and all these things started to come out, and it made so much easier when we started getting like QR codes. Like it's just so like remember when QR codes like first came out, you're like what, like huh? And now like they're just so easy as pie. Like they're built into a lot of systems already. You can increase your movement in your classroom using technology. All right, now whether or not that's virtually or whether or not that's actually in person, physical movement is up to you. But man, you can use your laptops, your tablets, your smartphones. I would do QR code scavenger hunts. Oh my gosh, man! Like, can you imagine, like, coming in and teaching grammar, any type of grammar, right? Imagine you're in seventh grade in South Carolina, you're teaching the 4 types of sentences, right, as deemed by the standards, and you're like, oh, here we go. But now you set up a QR code scavenger hunt, and you've planned this out, and students are like actually using their devices to learn and having fun and moving around the room and scanning codes and figuring out what this one says and writing it down, things like that. It's a lot of fun. You can do interactive mapping. I love that. You can do active learning stations. Oh my gosh, like you don't need to have chart paper. You don't need to have posters. You don't need to have printed materials at learning stations. You can have a classroom of 25 kids. You can have 5 groups, and you can have 1 laptop for each group. A total of 5 laptops could be running. That's it. You could have those files somewhere. You can say, hey, station 1, station 2, station 3, station 4, station 5. You can have them up and running. You can download those to your LMS, have students pull them up, have them all set up, ready to go. And boom, you've got active learning stations with technology right then and there. All right. You can take your students on virtual field trips. In the front loading of a lot of information, we would do a lot of virtual field trips. I remember I took my students on a virtual field trip through the 1950s before we were starting to dive into the outsiders, just to get them into the idea of the time period, right? Formative relays is a fun one. Oh my goodness, formative relays is a fun one. Same idea as the active learning stations. Maybe you have 5 groups, 5 each. You have your formative, whatever you're using, Kahoot, Quizlet, whatever you choose to use, forms, and you have them relay race back and forth, right? Or even so much so, like even if they're individually, like you need to go pair up and you need to find someone who has this, like moving around the room. That's it. Those are the types of collaborative activities that you want to be doing all day every day, right? And that really brings us to it. Like that's just some really quick ideas. 45 minutes goes by really fast. Those are some really quick ideas to get tech going into your classroom as quickly as possible. I regret nothing. I am so happy that I was able to share some of this with you today. I hope that you took one thing away and that you'll be able to go back and say, hey, like I learned this one thing, or I've got this one idea from this guy that I saw, and even if 99% of this was not your jam, that 1% could turn the tide. Some things are born out of just small ideas first, right? So that's it. And again, I just want to throw this up there. The link for the presentation will be in there. I'll put that in post. Got to finish it first, right? And if you want to connect with me, you go right ahead. I'm not into follower accounts or anything like that, but I do like to follow folks and learn from them as much as they might learn from me. And I certainly do thank you for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this experience.